Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio. I'm your host, Reverend Raven, and joining me live in St. Petersburg, Florida, is a good friend of mine and an amazing, incredible woman that has a wild life adventure stories to share with us this evening. But the most of all, she's just this beautiful soul that has overcome amazing obstacles to make it into this world. So, Judith, say hi to our listeners.
Hey there, greetings everyone.
So Judith, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's hear your life story. Let's start from the beginning because you are an amazing soul who in a woman's time worked in a man's world, correct?
Correct. I always say I'm a woman trapped in a man's job. I've been a licensed building contractor for 30 plus years. Um, yeah, so I got my start back in the day when it was harder.
Yeah, that definitely so. And why did you choose that career path? Why not, you're very beautiful. Why not be an airline stewardess or something like that? Why did you choose to go something really difficult?
I don't know. Could be a couple of reasons. I think it chose me. I think, I always thought it's really important to like your job. My mother worked in a factory and she'd come home so tired and say how she hated her job. I don't think she hated her job. She was just tired raising 7 kids and working so hard. And I thought, well, you really have to like what you do. And I searched very hard for it. And I think a little bit it is my father, although I didn't get to know him. He was a world-class stunt pilot, and he was the first in his time to get a national sponsor. So he was always pushing to be different and unique and look for deep challenges. And sometimes I think maybe that's just the apple falling close to the tree.
And yet you didn't really have a lot to do with him growing up, right?
No, I didn't know him, and he died when I was very young, and I really didn't know him before that much either. So, yeah.
I gotcha. And you went into the construction industry in the 80s, is that correct?
Yes. So I got an art degree and I couldn't type. And back in those days, we didn't have computers and spell check. And you had to be, women that got it to work in offices had to be impeccable at spelling and grammar. And I wasn't that good at it. And I just ended up going into art. I always seemed to excel in that. And I ended up after graduating. So in art, you do learn how to work with power tools quite a bit in the studios, making your own frames. So you use the table saws. And also, I was very poor working my way through college. So I moved around a lot. I moved to 2 or 3 different states to attend college, and I would just build my own furniture. So I really like building things. But I would call up jobs, I would call up these construction companies from the time I was 18 looking for jobs, and they would just laugh and say, we don't hire girls. Like this was unheard of. And I thought, well, why not? Like, we're strong, we're smart. But after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City to become a rich and famous artist. Well, what I did find is, you know how all the waiters and waitresses are actors and actresses? Well,
Yes.
carpenters are art majors.
Ah,
So I got pulled into that world pretty quickly. And yeah, that's where my journey my career, I should say, started.
wow. That is really incredible. So you started out in New York City
Yeah.
with
That little place
construction.
called New York City.
Oh my God, that's really crazy. So when did you move down to St. Petersburg, Florida?
Oh, well, it was actually my mother and my sister and her family had first moved here. And I think at one point I left New York City, and I think that was maybe perhaps 1989. And then my sister's family stayed. And then my mother left, I think, eventually. And then I left. I didn't feel like this was it for me. I did like it here, but there wasn't much going on then.
Right.
So, and I wanted more adventure, wanted to see everything. So I left in maybe 2 years later, and then I came back. Um, I think I think back in 1999.
Wow.
Yeah. So, but I had visited here a few times in between because I had
Right.
family here.
Right. Well,
Mhm.
it was still back in 1999, if you were doing construction here in this area, it was still a man's world here. You,
Oh
you-
yeah.
oh yeah, and it was a big boys club society, to be able to do any type of construction projects or anything like that. Did you run into that yourself?
Oh, absolutely. So I had worked in New York City. I worked in the first time I came here. I got a job at a big construction franchise corporation in purchasing, but I was also doing side jobs because I really wasn't here that long. So I was doing a number of like renovations, and then when I left, I purchased. I was going to go to Alaska, and I packed up my car and my dogs, and my car broke down in Colorado Springs. I was actually stopping there as a stop off point. I had attended college there. I graduated from college in the Springs. I had a friend, and I was going to visit, and then my car broke down. So I was getting it turned out I had to have my engine rebuilt. It was a big deal. And while I was waiting, I started looking at houses, and I found a 100-year-old house in old Colorado City. And I think it was, they were asking $45,000 at the time.
Wow.
And I drove by the house, I fell in love with it. I got to see it, and I got to see it like on a Friday. And so I told the realtor, I guess the woman who had lived there had passed away, and the family was in New York. And I told the realtor, I said, 35,000 or Anchorage. Like, it's not negotiable, but I knew I could fix the house up. So
Right.
he had contacted the family. He said, I'll let you know Monday morning. And I had picked up my car Monday morning, and I was either going to drive to Alaska or drive to my new house. And he told me, you got the house. So
Wow.
my next big project was, I spent a year and a half, maybe 2 years, renovating that house from top to bottom, like just really gutting it out, rewiring the whole house, drywall, insulation, the whole thing, redesigning the whole house. So that was my project. So that was one way I got to work. We just started buying my own houses. And then I think after 2 years, I wanted to move back to New York, but I flew to Paris and fell in love with an Algerian dentist, and we got married and ended up in San Francisco. So I sold the house, and I had worked odd jobs. I actually worked for a construction company, but it was really difficult. I was harassed quite a bit, and this was a government contractor. The superintendents were really aggressive with me. They talked down to me quite a bit. They didn't treat me the same as the men. They would call these meetings. I worked with we had a crew of 18 to 20, and I was working as a carpenter and then working on my house. And they said they had to fill a quota, like they needed some females, and I became the token female, which was fine. I just wanted to work. So then they would call everyone's name except mine and say, guys, let's have a meeting and bump heads, and they would leave me working. So it wasn't a really good environment. So I ended up leaving, and I did some waitressing, and then I finished my house, and I made a comfortable profit, and then moved to San Francisco.
Wow. That's incredible. When did you get your contractor's license
It
and
was
all of
actually
this?
in California because the licensing law really, to my surprise, wasn't that well developed as it is now.
Mhm.
They had these kind of peculiar local licenses. Colorado didn't have a clear path for licensing, and I didn't have a business there. I was really just working on my house, and but California had a very clear state license you could apply for, and the test was very reasonable. Like, you study for the test, there were no trick questions; they were real questions. So I signed up with a school. I took the test after I got out there, and I got my license in California, and then I started another business there.
Wow. That is really incredible. And when you started your business out there, was it really hard for you to drum up business as a female contractor in California, or was it more liberal and accepting out in California?
We should really back up to New York a bit because it ties into that narrative. When I was in New York City, I met these two other women. One was an electrician and one was a plumber. They were both from New York, so they knew the
Hmm.
landscape way better than I did. I mean, I just fell off a turnip truck from Wisconsin, so like from a farm in Wisconsin. Um, so they said, "Why don't you team up with us? You do your own thing, but when we need a carpenter and when you need an electrician, we kind of work together as a team." So what I learned is that gay men really liked working with us. So it was that community that supported our work and didn't give us a hard time. And
Oh, wow.
and I have to tell you, um, at the time we established kind of a name and between the three of us. And again, we all had our own businesses, but we worked together. So at one point, Gloria Steinem was renovating her brownstone.
Oh,
And
wow.
our name and number were given to her, and she never called, not even for an estimate. So I think,
Really?
really, and this is
Oh,
at a time when you did not find women in construction.
no.
No way. And because it was a lumber store that told us about it, and they gave her our number. They ended up hiring this guy that I had worked for previously, who I have to say was a predator, to say the least, and he
Uh-huh.
harassed me quite a bit. And I think, okay, what is this women's movement really about? So are we supporting each other or not? But I have to tell you who did hire us. I don't know how many in your audience are familiar with Mother Hale. Um, she lived in Harlem. She had a brownstone, and she was the first. She took in children on orphans,
Oh, wow.
and she was the first woman, the first person to take in babies with AIDS. Like
Oh,
nobody wanted to go near because at the time everyone was scared. Like, oh, they thought you could get it from casual contact or, from sharing a bar of soap but we weren't afraid. So a lot of people were afraid to go like even renovate this place because she had a
mhm.
number of babies that were born to mothers with AIDS and they didn't know how, if the children would get AIDS and she just took them in and she was so loving. And I thought, this is amazing. She hired us, but we
Oh,
couldn't get
man.
the head of the women's movement to hire us.
I
So
know that just blows my mind that Gloria wouldn't even reach out to you guys, being women in a field that's that just mind blowing.
yes,
Shame on her.
and one of the guys she did hire was pretty bad, but uh, and also I want to say that you know the electrical contractor, the electrician. So she was from New York, Lower East Side, and she was in the unions, and she was beaten up twice and told to get out. And the third time, they pulled a gun on her and said, "Get out, or we're going to shoot you." Like,
Oh,
leave the unions. And it happened to the plumber too. And later in my time, I had a chance to get in the unions, and I was threatened as well. So we were not accepted or embraced in the unions whatsoever. Um, so who did teach it? The people that did teach me were it was Jerry and a Puerto Rican electrician.
mhm.
They were sort of my adopted family. There was a plumber from Barbados who also helped teach me plumbing. And there was so I was just taught the trades by all these minority males. And they helped me and the others as well. Like they would just try to teach us as much as they could and support us in as much as they could. So we didn't really get support there. And our clientele were predominantly gay men. And they told us that they were harassed too by contractors, because construction attracts a kind of macho, aggressive personality type. And they said that they were insulted by their contractors, and they just like working with us. So that's
Oh,
that's kind of an amazing story, but
it
they
is.
and
I'm and you didn't let any of the trials and tribulations that you had and the resistance keep you from doing something you really wanted to do. Like
no, and
a
in
lot
fact,
of people would give up, right?
right, and I had applied for jobs as superintendents. New York City is nothing but construction, ongoing, at all times. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of opportunity, but I wanted to work in the field and as a supervisor, a superintendent, or a project manager. No one would hire me for those positions. And I just thought, well, the doors are not opening for me. So I just built my own door. And that one opened just fine. So you just had to figure out who was there to support you, who was there to help you. It really wasn't, as I say, it wasn't the people like in the women's movement. It really wasn't the unions. It was this whole different group of people that kind of gave us our start.
Right. Well, during your start and all of the pushback that you had, did you ever have this fearful moment come over your life and go, "What am I doing?"
No, not until I was about 20 years into it, or 30. And then I'm like, what was I thinking? So much of my life up against such a difficult process. Why didn't I take the easy way? I have no idea. I don't know. I think that's part of the genetic inheritance from my father.
I think that's great. So you just kept pushing forward and moving toward and when you didn't have the work, you created it for yourself. I mean, that's amazing. The creation. You're such a creator, and we're going to get into the other things that you've created too. But I just like for our listeners out there to know that um, when you get something like a wall or block that comes up in your way and you really want to do that, don't give up on it at all because great things will come out of it. I mean, you've even won awards being a contractor, correct?
Yes, I have. I just loved construction so much. I felt there was like I was born to do this and I had to do it. And I just couldn't see doing anything else. And there was just no choice for me but to continue to do it. So moving to Florida, like I say, after New York City, moving to Florida, I did some side renovation and worked for a company in an office in purchasing. That gave me a lot more training and leverage, but I didn't want to work in an office. I really, really liked being on site and doing the work and overseeing the work. And then in Colorado, I did my own house. And then in San Francisco, I became licensed and and then started a business there. So San Francisco, again, they had my community of gay men, and they were extremely supportive of working with women at the time. So now I think we're up to about 1989, 1990,
Uh-huh.
and um, it was no problem there whatsoever at that time, uh, working in the gay community. And they were very supportive of women in construction. I still didn't meet that many women in construction, but I did well. And then I also didn't like California that much, kind of always pined to go back to New York. But I ended up, just before I was going to leave, and just before I left, I had an opportunity to buy a house for really cheap in San Francisco, which is like being able to buy a house in St. Pete today.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
it was just going crazy out there. And then I got this house at the last minute, and it was a fixer upper in a nice area. So I was running my business and doing the work, and then coming home and working on my house. So it took me about a year and a half, 2 years to do that one. And I renovated that one from top to bottom too. So then when I left, I thought, well, I'm the luckiest person in San Francisco because I really don't want to stay here and I have a house, I mean, to sell. So was nice. And I moved back to Florida. And
What brought you back to Florida from there?
at that point, I think I had about 12 relatives had acquired here. All my brothers and sisters, almost every one of them. So a big part of my family was here, and I'd gone through a lot of changes in California, and I was just looking for, I don't know, something. I just wanted to come back to Florida
Yeah.
and be close to my family. So,
Wow. I don't have any family here. I moved down here off and on over the 80s and the 90s and finally stayed back down here in the 90s in Florida. And I had come to St. Petersburg first, but then I moved over to the East Coast, Hope Sound, Martin County, all Jupiter Island, that area over there. And
mhm,
then I came back here. I love this side. There's something
yeah.
about the energy here in St. Petersburg.
Hmm.
It's very diverse and very loving. It's a very community oriented
Yeah.
place to live.
Hmm.
So, speaking of that, you came back here and you start doing construction when you came back here?
Yes. So this time I had bought my mother a house, and once I moved here, I could see it was getting to be a bit too much for her. So she wanted a smaller place. So I said, find a condo, or she ended up finding a really nice mobile home, and it was in a
Mhm.
park that's been since demolished, but it was on the street, so it wasn't like tucked away in a park. It's like a little house on the street, and it was a newer one. So I bought that for her. It was a few blocks from the house. It was really nice to be close to her. And then, yeah, I had actually obtained my license here while I was living in California.
Oh,
Flew down here several times to take the classes. Now, the test in Florida at the time was very difficult. It took a year before they would qualify me to sit for the test. So I didn't know if this is slow rolling because I was a female. It could have been. I had asked some of the other guys when I was there, like, you know, how long did it take you to get qualified to sit for the test? They'd say like, oh, a month or two. I'm like, took me almost a year. So um, I had qualified based on the fact I held a license in a state that had a state recognized license, and the only state they recognized was California. So I had ended up applying to take the test. There were 3 tests, and at the time, they said only 30% of the applicants were allowed to pass the test. And if more people passed the test, they would have to make the test harder. So this test was filled with a lot of trick questions that
wow.
made no sense. But they taught us how to read the questions carefully and to find the answers. And then we had 18 books at the time, and it was an open book exam, but you would have to know which book to look in to find the answers. So it was a very competitive test. So I had missed one of the 3 by, I think, a couple of points.
Uh-huh.
I flew back down here to retake the test, and somehow I was given the wrong date.
Uh-huh.
I showed up a day late, and there was
Oh, oh no.
I had to retake it again, and I flew down here like a few months later and retook it again. Then I finally passed. So it was a very hard-earned license. But when I arrived, I had a contractor's license. Um, so I ended up renovating that house, and I took some time off. Um, and then eventually I started a business in 2005. So that's in Florida.
Right. What was the name of your business in 2005?
E-construction group.
Wow. Is it still going or is it?
No, actually, I closed it with the when COVID hit and the lockdowns came, and
Mhm.
my projects imploded because nothing could move, and I just decided that was the time to put the shingle down, and I had had enough.
I gotcha. The house that you're in now, didn't you do that yourself?
Yes, so I seem to have a love for 100-year-old houses. The house I purchased in so this was the thing. I had this house I purchased for my mother. My partner and he and I stayed in that house for 10 years. And my mother eventually moved to Colorado and then passed away. So I stayed in that house, and then my business was really taking hold, and the relationship had ended I was in, and I ended up selling the house during the time that everything was crashing. That was during the 08, 09
Oh,
downfall,
yes, yes,
like
yes.
mortgage crisis. And
Mhm.
I ended up selling that house, and I moved into the mobile home, which was consequently across the street from my office. So I thought, this is great. I don't have to think about my home too much. And I used to clean like 20 hours a week. Now it was like 15 minutes and everything was done. Like,
Wow.
wow, this is great. I love small living. Um, and I put a lot of energy into my business. And so that was during the economic downturn. And then I was kind of stuck in this lease when when all of it was like no more work. Everything just froze up. People couldn't pay the funds were seizing up. That was during the mortgage crisis. Actually, I had on 3 occasions men come into my office with guns demanding to be paid immediately. They were hysterical. They didn't think they could feed their families. I had been working 70 hours a week to keep my head above water, and it was really scary. And I thought, people will kill you for an apple. Like,
Oh gosh.
it was bad. The level of stress I saw, because if you understand that Florida and Nevada were two of the hardest hit states in the nation,
Mhm.
we relied on construction so much. And
Mhm.
in Florida, so we were always number 1 and 2 every month. Like, it'd be Nevada, then it would be Florida. And in Florida, it was the I-4 corridor that was the hardest hit in the state of Florida.
Oh, wow.
We were number 1 for the hardest hit in construction. So guys were coming into my office crying, hysterical, like they didn't know what they were going to do because we were hit so bad. I remember my cupboards being bare and just having a bag of beans, not knowing what to do with it because I really don't cook. And
Mm.
it was frightening. It was really frightening. I was glad to have a lot of fruit trees because I seriously lived off what was growing in my yard. And uh, so I just saw the devastation, and I became really interested in economics. I read 17 books on the foreclosure crisis um, to kind of get my head around it. I saw
Right.
everybody losing their homes. Um, we tried to buy a group of us tried to help a neighbor of ours buy her home back, and
Mhm.
um, the lenders were sending people there to buy these homes back for fractions, for pennies on the dollar. And if you bid
Yes.
against them, they had to bid them up to the price that the person owed. So, for example, our neighbor owed 125,000, and they were bidding on the house. And if I didn't bid against her, they would have got it for like $5,000.
Wow.
And so the woman turns to me, and they always hired these young women with babies to go in there because I think they just didn't want people to go in there and beat them up. Like, it was such an emotional time. Um, and she turns to me and she's like, no. And she puts the price down, 125,000. Like, she was required to bid against anyone who bid against her to the price that was owed. So basically, you couldn't help your neighbors.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's horrible.
It was really sad. I just I just began to really think, you have to understand the monetary system to really understand what's going on. Um, but I was in this lease.
Mhm.
If I broke my lease, I'd be liable for, like, you can't get out of a commercial lease. So I
Right.
thought, oh, I got to make this work somehow. So I just kept plugging away and made it.
You persevered and kept going all the way to the pandemic.
Oh yeah, but getting through that recession was really tough. Men didn't, for some reason, I don't know, maybe like a lot of women came out to work because what I saw was they have to feed their children. And that's what the female mind. If you have children, that's what you go into. I have to do whatever I have to do to keep my kids fed.
Right.
I found a lot of men were um, they were discouraged and they didn't want to work for less because there was work out there, but you had to work for less, and they didn't want to do it. And so I thought, well, I'll take the work. Like, I don't care. I want the money. I want to work. And I just kept trying so hard. I kept working and working and working. And you'd really have to compete and find the work and compete. So I ended up getting in with condominium associations. And eventually there was a bank-owned property that was empty for 3 years. The management was going to sue the bank because they weren't fixing the property. And it was just wall-to-wall mold. I mean, inches and inches of mold.
Ooh.
Black mold everywhere. It
Ooh.
had been leaking for 3 years and completely abandoned, and they were like fed up. So it was one of the big name banks, and I really wanted that job for a lot of reasons. And you didn't find many jobs at the time. And I worked really hard to get it, and I submitted a bid. And then I waited a few weeks. I didn't hear anything, and I lowered the bid. And I wrote a letter, and I said, I really want this job. And I reevaluated my bid. And so I got the job. And it turned out this was like an asset management company. So they had a lot of jobs like this.
Yeah.
So we ended up doing a really good job, on budget, on performance. And I started getting one more. And I started getting more outside of the area. So I would look for licensed contractors to subcontract to.
Mm-hmm.
And we started getting quite a few. And then one day they called me and they said, you're not only in our top 5 performing contractors, you're the best of the 5. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then they said, we've decided to work with fewer contractors and give more to the better contractors. So we ended up running about 175 jobs in that year.
Wow. And that's just from not giving up and believing in yourself and keeping yourself going.
Yes, I just kept saying there's got to be work out there and I'll find it. So, and I did that with 5 females who knew nothing about construction.
Wow. Really?
Yes.
So did you train them in construction? Is that what you did?
I just created a process, sort of a checklist and a process to process this work.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked very well. And I don't know. I would just hire men sometimes, and they would say, "Oh, this is too difficult, and you have to pay me more." And I'm like, "Well, if you can't really get your hands around the work, why should I pay you more? Like,
right?
If this is easy, I'll give you more work and pay you more." Like, that seems to be the logic. But they always said that. They said, "This work is too hard, and I just need." And I always said, "Look, 30 days, I'm going to pay you X," which was actually really good at the time.
Uh-huh.
And after 30 days, if you can get the job, I'll raise your pay.
Uh-huh.
But week 2, they go, "This job is so hard. I need more money." And I'm like, "Well, if it's so hard, it's above your skill set. Like, I should give you less money."
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Like, if you can but that was their thinking. And I'm like, I don't get this. So I think if the job is easy and you're able to master it, then I've got someone who has the right skill set for what we're doing. And of course I'll give you more money because you've got that down. So it just didn't seem to work. So I ended up with like a whole crew of females, and we just broke all kinds of records, like processing the work and wow, making them happy.
That is great. And it's all female crew doing this and getting through a very difficult time and then coming out ahead. I mean, wow, the vibration, the energy, the universe was supporting you. I mean, you were doing the work. You have to do the work, but I mean the synergies there and the creation was taking off in rockets.
Yes. It really did. And I think we got so busy, I didn't realize how much we were really doing, but we had a good system down, and we were able to process a very, very high volume of work and get it closed out.
Well, that
all
is
over the state of Florida. So we ran jobs all over the state in like 5 different regions.
wow. I bet I bet that was very tiring too, though, going all over the whole state doing different jobs like that.
No, I think at that point, I think always in 2005, remember the computers were here, but I just saw the potential. Like, you don't need to be there anymore. I just work with qualified licensed contractors, and
Hmm.
um, we would that could handle like a certain amount of volume. And we had a really good process for, like, you had to turn in a lot of photographs, a lot of written reports. So we did all that. And also I figured out like how I understand after working in the field in 4 or 5 different states, um, how contractors operate, like independent contractors who are doing the work in the field. Because I worked in the field. And
Hmm.
well, to be, it's really like you have to do the work and you have to run the business. And they're two different jobs.
Right.
So if you're doing both, you're really working two jobs, and like processing the invoices, doing the bids, keeping all of your certifications up to date and compliant, renewing all your business permitting. So all this administrative work is a full-time job. And then you have to deliver a construction product, right?
Right.
So I found that most independent contractors, they liked running their jobs and they were weaker in administration. So sometimes their wives were helping them, but they weren't, so I just set up a process that met all their needs. And I understand that the most important thing is that you get paid timely. So I really like the bank was they said we had a right to ask for deposits. But after a while they said, "Why are you taking deposits?" I said, "Because your manual says we can." And in a time with all this economic pressure, um, it was really important to get those deposits to get these guys working. Like, you need money. You've got to buy materials, you got to pay your creditors, you got to pay your crews. And money was so tight. I mean, that was a huge advantage. They did give us those deposits, but then they kept questioning me, like, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. And I'm like, yes, I should. So it was really important. And I understood, like, so when you finish a job, you have to invoice, you have to give a release of lien, you had to turn in all the photos. So basically, I prepared a lot of the documents that most companies would ask you to prepare as a subcontractor.
Hmm.
And I figured out what these guys need because I had been doing it myself. So we did it for them and made everything super easy. So it ran really smoothly and really, really fast.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a very creative process right there. And then you had it down to a system that it didn't take you so long to do it for multiple contractors. That's
Right.
very smart, Judith. I mean, mind-blowing smart.
In fact, I wanted to start a business where I would call it like my business, right? So
Mhm.
what we would do for contractors in particular, because I understand the subtleties of the massive amount of compliance we're held to. And we would do that for them. We could make all their appointments. We could manage all of their. I had something like 13 or 14 different things I had to renew yearly or bi-yearly, right?
Mhm.
So you have to renew your. I had like 4 different kinds of insurance I was required to have. You've got to maintain that. You
Right.
constantly have to change what you're required to have for different jobs. So you might get a job and they require you have 2 million instead of $1 million coverage. So you got to call your agent and get the insurance certificates out. I have to renew my license. I hold 4 different state licenses. Have to renew those every 2 years. And then, like, I do 2 or 3 in one year, and then I do one on the other year. And then it's just a whole lot of things to keep up to date. And then you have to do invoicing, you have to write up estimates. So I had figured all this out. I mean, that's basically what we did. Is we ended up not doing the jobs, except some locally. We had a couple of clients here that we worked for exclusively. And um, what I figured out is just how to make it easy for them, the subcontractors, to operate and stay focused in the field. So I would take care of all their administrative work. which no company will do for you. They expect you to do that.
Right.
So I thought, well, I'm going to start a business and just manage their businesses. And several people told me, I will invest in that business because it takes 4 days for my contractor to call me back. And I'm like, I know. And I know why it takes them 4 days, but we could fix that problem for them. And I started to do some feasibility, and I was going to recruit. I did some research, and I had found a way to start recruiting contractors. It would be like we'd be a service, like they could buy into the service, and we could handle so much of their administrative work. But
wow, that is incredible thinking right there, outside the box, and creating that system. And now that the pandemic stopped all of that stuff, right? What are you doing now to fill your time?
So after decades of being a woman trapped in a man's job, I had, I think it was around 2017, I started thinking, well, I kind of want to transition into something else in a few years. I don't want to, this is a very hard business. Been doing it 30, 35 years. I want to do something else. Like I mastered all of the things that I wanted to master, and I was just getting tired of it. But I looked up one day, and I was still in the mobile home, and I'm like, I don't have a house. And all of a sudden I saw the prices going crazy,
right?
Which I always knew someday it would.
Right.
I said, even in 1999, this place will turn into San Francisco. I could see it. Or Peninsula, same thing.
Right.
Real estate's going to go through the roof. Well, I wasn't paying attention. And I had started a nonprofit. And you know what? I think it was like Trump got elected. Everybody was getting their feathers ruffled. And I thought, good, get off the sofa and do something. It's about time. I'm glad everybody started waking up. It's like, if you're not happy with your elected officials, you have power to do something. So what I was really excited about is to see a lot of movements start, a lot of different activism really started. I thought, oh, this is so interesting. I really want to kind of transition and also, I had been renting an office for 12 years, and we had to move because they tore the building down and they built a gas station. They built a big Wawa over there. And I thought, okay, and my mother was getting ready to pass. So the day I had to, and my brother was calling me, he's like, get ready. So the day I had to move out, I had sold off everything and put some things in storage. He calls, he's like, it's time. So I'm like, oh, God is working with me. And I just was able to stay with her until she passed away. Aww. So I came back and I said, all right, now I have because construction's a little bit like a faucet, right? You can finish up your jobs and not take any more. You can turn it on and take as many as you like. So you have a lot of control over your time. So I was shutting my faucet off because I knew I had to be with my mother for the end of her life. And I was losing my office. So I had this transitional moment, and I came back and I thought, do I really want to stay here? I really wanted to move to South America. It's one of my dreams. So I was thinking about that. I was making trips down there. And then I started seeing all this activism, and I thought, I was like everybody else. I think we were all looking at, what could I do? What would I like to do?
Right.
And I started learning more about cooperatives. And I was so intrigued because cooperatives are businesses. And I thought, oh, I know business. I like business. And I just didn't quite understand what they were, how they operated. And then I started listening to Richard Wolff. He's quite popular. He's a professor of economics who really speaks a lot about co-ops. So I started learning more, because I actually had free time for the first time in 20 years. This free time? What's that? And I was able to read up on it, and I learned it's really business. It's just different how you do the accounting and how you make your decisions, and ownership and how you make decisions. I thought, this is fascinating. I get this. And, yet I was still thinking about moving. So I found a training as a cooperative developer training, and I didn't think I wanted to do cooperative development. I thought if anything, I might change my construction company and to be worker owned. Um, but I just sort of like was hedging. It was held in Wisconsin, which by the way is number one in the country for co-ops, like best cooperative law, probably the most cooperatively owned businesses. And I just decided I had to be in Wisconsin about the same time. So I ended up taking this training, and it really was just life changing. And I came back, and I all of a sudden, uh, I was offered space at Pinellas Technical College. I'm like, what? Like, nothing ever easy comes in construction. It has been an uphill battle. It's like swimming upstream my whole life, and all of a sudden, it was just coming easy. I was advocating to the greenhouse, the St. Pete Greenhouse, the Business Assistance Center. I took so many classes there. Not having a business degree myself, I just love that place. I had learned so much over the years. And I started saying, why don't you teach classes in co-ops? And it took a while, but they eventually said, okay, that's a good idea. So I started teaching classes over there. I was looking for someone else to teach them. I'm like, oh, I'm not a teacher. I don't know. But I just understood the topic so well. And I felt like I had to explain it to other people. And
well, explain to our listeners what a co-op is, because I don't think a lot of people that listen know what a co-op is.
Right. I do find that they're not very popular in Florida, but most people think they're shared kitchens or some underground Stalinist economy being run out of their neighbor's garden. They're actually they're real businesses, and lots of people say they're a co-op. And I say, well, how much is a share of stock? And they're like, huh? And I'm like, you're not a co-op, not in the true definition. So a cooperative is a business that's owned by the people that use their service. And there are 5 different types of cooperatives recognized in state statutes or IRS or by the IRS. So the first and most common is in agriculture, because 30% of our agriculture is delivered through some form of a co-op, which is kind of amazing. So the producer marketing co-op is the most so that's where, let's say you're a farmer, let's say you grow oranges and I grow oranges, and we're really good at growing oranges, and we know 6 other people who own farms, and we're all incorporated businesses that grow oranges.
Right.
We're really good at that, but we're not any good at getting them in the store, right? Because now you've got to kind of like box them up, and you got to sell. So sometimes middlemen will come to you and they'll say, well, I'll buy your oranges, and they go sell them, right?
Right.
But what happens is they make most of the money. So a producer marketing co-op is like, we get together and our businesses form this business, and that business will get the oranges sold and distributed to markets. So people don't realize, but Organic Valley, which is a very popular organic dairy net brand, they're one of the largest co-ops in the world.
Really?
Yes. Ocean Spray is a co-op. Land O'Lakes. So some really big names are producer marketing co-ops, which are great because then you know all of the products are coming locally. Like they're coming as close to you as possible. So if you wanted to join in, let's say the Organic Valley co-op, you would have to prove yourself to be a reliable supplier. You have a dairy farm and you're going to sell milk under the brand. Okay. So you would have to be a part of that co-op for a while. There's usually a waiting period, and you'd have to adhere to the standards that they have. They want you to produce a quality product and be a reliable producer. And then you would get an opportunity to buy into that business with your business. So you individually don't own that co-op. Your business owns it. So what you do is you cut cost, and the milk is delivered at cost. So more of the profit stays in the pocket of the farmer, and it really helps our farmers.
Wow, I did not realize that's a co-op right there. And but the people that create the co-op though, they're getting paid for the going out and reaching for the business and stuff like that too, right? But most of the money stays in the farmer's hands.
Correct. So the IRS says in order to qualify as a co-op, there has to be a buy-in. So you have to buy in, even if
Mhm.
it's $1, you have to pay, and there has to be an economic benefit. Well, the co-op itself makes almost zero profit. You want to make zero profit, but the
Mhm.
IRS says the economic benefit is your individual business will realize a higher profit because you're not paying all that money to the middleman who would then be taxed. It's going into your personal business. So the taxes will be realized within your own business. But the co op will make no money. So it operates at cost, but the benefit is to the farmer's business.
I
So
got.
that's one of the criteria. That is a producer marketing co op. Now you can
Mhm.
apply that model to other types of businesses, but that is just the most recognized way that producer marketing co-ops. The next co-op is maybe a little more familiar. It's like the producer marketing, but it's for the individual. And those are consumer co-ops. Now there are about 29,000, I think there are about 18,000 producer marketing co-ops in the US, somewhere around there. I know there are about 20, not just under 30,000 consumer co-ops. Consumer co-ops are where the individuals own the business, and they're very common in credit unions are co-ops. They are owned by the, well, they're not really owned, but yeah, they're owned by the users. So they're nonprofits. They have their own 501 designation. I think it's
Mhm.
like a 501(14), something you've never heard of. It's only for credit unions.
Okay.
Um, Grocery co-ops, which there I think are about around 150 in the country. There are many, many startups lately. They're about, those are owned by the consumers. So you buy a one-time membership, which is a share of stock, and you
Mhm.
own that grocery store. And what happens is that gives you the right to have a say in how the grocery store is. Maybe you want them to carry certain products. They'll listen to you. Whatever profits the grocery store makes. Um, so everyone gets their salaries. The people working at the grocery co-op may or may not be a member. Um, but you can sit on the board of directors, but it's owned by the consumers. So when you're buying a membership into a grocery co-op, you're actually buying a share of stock, and you have a say. And you could say, hey, would you guys sell this product, or um, we need more, I don't know, red licorice in the store. Like, you can ask. And also, when the grocery stores make a profit, they figure out what they can do with it to give back to the consumers. That could be in the form of a distribution check.
Uh-huh.
You spent $1,000 there and the grocery store was profitable and you get a 10% return. They
Nice.
they would send you a check for $100. Or they could come up with programs, or they can come up with they kind of get ask for the members to vote, and they say, should we expand and start using that toward another store in another area underserved? So there's all kinds of ways that can be used, but it's to be used for the consumers.
Is the price setting of the food that they sell in these grocery stores, are they reasonably cheaper than a like Publix or Kroger's or any of those grocery stores? Is there a benefit by going and creating a co-op for groceries?
I have a really good thing. You know those nutritional labels? They
Yeah.
have one like a nutritional label of the benefits of co-ops. So the benefits are they use a much higher percentage of locally sourced food
Uh-huh.
and products. They pay higher wages. They
Nice.
tend to be greener on
Mm.
many. There's some way they measure the infrastructure of the actual stores are much greener. Um, I wish I had it in front of me. I could look it up, but it could take a minute. But it's like it lists like several benefits of grocery co-ops. And I know one thing for sure, which is part of my spiel or my drill, is for every dollar, let's say you spend at a typical big box store,
Uh-huh.
you create $1.32 in economic activity. So you create 32 cents in economic activity over that dollar you spend, right?
Right.
For every dollar you spend in a co-op or a farmer's market, you create a dollar. It's a dollar 61. So it's like
Wow.
29 cents more in economic activity. So they
Nice.
circulate more money locally
Uh-huh.
within neighborhoods.
I like that concept.
So they bring up community wealth. And I did a lot of math down here in these food deserts. It's kind of shocking how much money is leaving these neighborhoods where I actually live. So that's a consumer co-op. The next one, oh, and I don't want to miss out in saying housing co-ops are consumer co-ops. We just sort of separate them out because there's 1.5 million housing co-ops in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can have a market rate housing co-op, or you could have a limited equity or a zero equity co-op. So I want to really touch on this because we're seeing such a crisis in affordable housing.
Yes.
And I don't want anyone to fault me for not trying. I sat on an affordable housing policy committee. I brought great policy back from Washington, D.C. It's called TOPA, Tenant Opportunity Purchase. It gives the first right of refusal to the person who's occupying the home. So if your landlord is selling your house, they have to offer it to you first. If they're selling your building, they would have to offer it to the tenants. And in the state of Florida, mobile home parks, by law, are supposed to offer it. They actually have that clause. They're supposed
Really?
to offer it to the tenants. And those are called resident-owned communities. That's where the community would buy the land.
Mm-hmm.
Technically, that's all the mobile home park owns is the land, right?
Right.
And the management office. You actually own your own mobile home. But they've made 6 loopholes for mobile home parks to get around that.
Mm.
And they use them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So developers can fast track and take advantage of getting the land, which they've been doing in St. Pete quite a bit. So tenant opportunity to purchase would be great because many homeowners just say, well, one day my landlord puts up a for sale sign. And then he calls me and tells me I have to move. So if it's a multifamily unit, how it would work is, let's say, in fact, I want to tell you, when rents were on the rise, this really smart realtor calls me, one of the best I know. And he says, I kind of know about co-ops. I haven't really had too much experience with them, but found this 20-unit building. And it was in a very desirable location on First Avenue South. And he said, I figured out with the asking price that if you got 20 people to buy it, everybody's mortgage, taxes, and insurance would be $189 a month.
Oh my goodness.
These apartments at the time were probably renting for $900 to $1,200 and easily $1,500 to $1,700 now.
Oh.
I could not find 20 people. I could not even find 10 people to get interested in even having a dialogue about it. And this is when rents were really going up. So I had, so what we could do as cooperative developers is traditional banks, like I even talked to someone who worked for Wells Fargo, and they're like, no, we wouldn't lend on that because that means every unit is under $25,000. And we have a minimum. I said, and a lot of banks don't want to do co-op loans because they're share loans. So how it would work is 20 people get together,
Mm-hmm.
they form a corporation, they adopt their bylaws, and let's say we're going to make it a limited or zero equity co-op, because that's the kind I want to work on.
Right.
Because it truly creates affordable housing in perpetuity. So that might mean, let's say you get that unit for $25,000, and 2 years later you go, oh my, look what's happened in St. Pete. I can get $250,000 for this place. I'm going to flip it, right? Well,
Right. That's what they do.
You cannot do that.
Yeah.
You can recover your $25,000.
Mm-hmm.
Either you can get a limited return, let's say 1 or 2%, or 10%, whatever the bylaws decide. That's where we come in. We help you understand those decisions, and you may get, or you can sell for 10% over what you paid for it, but let's say 10% has to go back to the co-op.
Right.
Therefore, everybody who's living there has a lower maintenance fee. Now, people say, well, all of us, we want to make money on our houses. I'm like, yeah, but you see, they're not raising our wages. And therefore, they're telling us our houses are ATM machines. And we have we're pricing ourselves out of our homes.
Yes.
It's a trick.
Yes, it
And
is.
you think you're making all this money, but think of all the money you would have in your pocket if you had a mortgage for $189 a month. Think of the massive amount of cash you would acquire over so many years not paying that to a bank.
Yes.
So what we would do is we know where the funds are. We know who lends to housing co-ops. So we would get together with people and we would explain this process. You organize a corporation. Usually the housing co-ops are not for profit. Again, the IRS says there has to be a buy-in and there has to be an economic benefit. So I struggled with this question for years. How is there an economic benefit? You're on a nonprofit, you're not making profit. The benefit is the money that's in your pocket. Instead of paying $1,800 a month and you're paying $189. So the economic benefit is something like, okay, $1,600 in that argument, right?
Right.
So the benefit goes into your pocket. It's the money you save. So the thing is, I was sitting on an affordable housing policy committee. I'd introduced TOPA because let's say someone calls us up with a 20-unit building, we could help them get the financing. The city has many down payment programs. So they told me, well, it doesn't matter if they're co-ops or not. We can help people get the down payment. So here I'm trying to tell people I can get you into an apartment, a 1 and 2 bedroom apartment for an insanely low price with almost nothing down because the city's going to help you with your down payment. Usually the co-op banks want 20% down payment.
Right.
And then the co-op banks will also write in 3 years of training. So we can be there to help you train you to teach you how to run your co-op.
Wow.
And I couldn't get anyone to show up.
No.
So I
bet you could now, though.
Nope. I offer classes all day long and people just go, oh, that's great. Yeah, I'm like, get a group. I'll present to you for free. I have a nice presentation. We'll explain the process. So I think, okay, that's there. But now even the multifamilies are getting higher and higher price. So it's what I've come to understand is that so we struggle. Like this nonprofit doesn't make any money. I do a lot of free consulting. I help people a lot because I really believe in the project. But I remember about the same time I found this building and I was being very loud about trying to get people interested. 2 gentlemen blew into town and said, we're going to get rent control. I'm like, good luck with that. You're going up against the state. They raised $10,000 overnight. And I think people genuinely just want someone else to do it for them. Right. They want the laws to change. They want their politicians to do it, which apparently they're not. No. And it's just like they would actually have to, like, if to buy into this co-op, they would have to show up for meetings. They would have to learn how to, make these decisions. And there's a lot of effort involved and they just don't want to do that. So I think I can't fix that piece. No. When people are ready, I'm here. So this was a few years ago with this housing co-op. And then in the policy committee, I brought this fantastic legislation. And I thought it's good for individual homeowners, like people who are renting houses, they would have the first right of refusal. But there's policy already written in DC about this. And there's the National Housing Co-op Association. They have a lot of great information. And it just fell on deaf ears. I'm bringing back policy. I'm bringing back research and like research papers on this. And they didn't care. And to me, my impression was all of the policy we were asked to look at benefited developers, contractors, or financiers. And nothing I saw presented or taken seriously would benefit the renter or the homeowner. Wow. So I felt like this is not what I'm here for. And I just didn't think it was where I was best suited to be. So I left that. And There was one, I think when I was teaching a class, it's called Housing Co-ops are Corporations Too, How Limited Equity Housing Co-ops Can Contribute to Affordable Housing. And I think we have a people's budget review every year. So politicians show up and they're like, what do you want in the budget? And they pretend like they're listening to you. But it's like the thing, you can go there. So one year I kind of gotten tired of going because I feel like I'm going to this every year and we're asking and we're not seeing results. So I just thought I've got other things to do.
Right.
And that night I read that more people showed up and complained about affordable housing than any other topic. It was like a record turnout demanding affordable housing. And 2 days later, which was heavily advertised, I was teaching housing co-ops are corporations too, and how limited equity housing co-ops can contribute to affordable housing.
Right.
And 5 people showed up. So I just think people aren't ready for it.
No, it doesn't sound like it. Let me ask you this: in the St. Petersburg community or Pinellas County in general, I would like to see. We have a lot of homeless people here, right? And out in Washington State and Portland, Oregon, and those areas, they've created little tiny house communities where they have they have a patch of land and they have about 20 little tiny houses on this little patch of land with a little community garden, and they're teaching them how to take care of a house and grow a community together. Do we have anything like that here in St. Petersburg or Pinellas County at all?
I've heard about tiny house communities starting. I've never latched onto it for a couple of reasons. As a builder, I think I kind of see tiny houses as a trick. First off, there's well-documented studies that people will not live in less than 450 square feet for more than 2 years. It's not something we adapt to well.
Mm-hmm.
Short-term solution. Number 2, to me, the expense of building is in your plumbing, electrical, and mechanical hookups. And once you build that,
mm-hmm.
like adding extra square footage is not that much.
Okay.
That's my opinion as a builder.
I gotcha.
So they're really kind of trying to sell us less for more.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third reason I don't really get behind tiny houses is, so I think it's less for more. It's not really, we don't adapt to it well. I know there was one other reason. And then homelessness. I have one of my dearest and longest and best friends. He is my brother, my spiritual brother. He's been in AA for 30 years. In fact, he had his 30-year anniversary today.
Aww.
So very committed to his sobriety. And you find a lot of homelessness and he goes to NA, and you find a lot of homelessness in communities where people have substance abuse problems. And they've all told me, you're not solving homelessness by putting someone with these problems in a home, because they usually leave within a month. Like, they have other problems that need to be addressed besides a roof over their head. Like, a lot of these programs are saying, hey, we put all these, people in these programs in these houses, and they say they're gone in a month. Like, it's not the core of the problem. They need help. And until they get help, the housing won't really fix their problem. There are people who are homeless for financial reasons, and because our system isn't really working for us very well. And yeah, there's a lot of people it would help, but I don't know if tiny houses, it seems to address veterans with trauma or maybe with substance abuse problems. If they're addressing those other problems, they could work.
Right.
Could work. But
yeah. So a lot of the homeless have mental health issues, basically, and they're not going to stay in a house anyway.
Right.
I gotcha.
They won't. And this is by many people in the program that I've met through my best friend say, yeah, these guys are getting put up in houses and hotels, particularly during COVID, but they don't even stay in them, because that's not the real problem. So I'm not sure I mean, I guess it works for some, but I
Mm-hmm.
just think that if people don't live in small spaces for more than 2 years, I don't, unless they're at least 450 square feet. I would never live in less than 750.
Me personally, I like the idea of less is more.
Yes, but I have a nice space of 850 that's very spare, and less is more. But and I love land. But getting back to the two other types of costs. So we've covered producer marketing, consumer. There's something called shared service. So we'll just get these 5 types out of the way. There's shared service co-ops, and Ace Hardware is a shared service co-op. Carpet One, so some very big names, and that's where usually governments, uh, education, like schools, restaurants are number one for shared service. So you buy in together, your company, your corporation buys in, again, like the producer marketing, buys
Right.
into another company, and you make mass purchases together and you get discounted prices. So you buy into this company, and which employs purchasing experts and distribution people. And there's like, that company doesn't need to make a profit. They operate at cost. So the restaurants, like McDonald's has a shared service co-op. Once you buy a franchise, they're like, you got to buy into the shared service co-op. They're going to supply you with all their, so they all do all the purchasing. And it was interesting that when the city of St. Pete had converted, they got rid of the plastic straws.
Yes.
All the restaurants got together and said, my gosh, these sustainable straws are really expensive. What are we going to do? And they were grouping together saying, what are we going to do? So the city said, well, talk to Judith. And then that night I presented about shared service co-op. And then there was a woman there who could do purchasing for them. So she was an independent business and she could do it for them. And of course she's going to make a profit. That's fine.
Right.
That's fine to business. But I explained to them, like, you could start buying napkins together. You can start buying cookware together. You can start buying, it's not just the straws. You can create a labor pool. So if one restaurant is growing and needs more help, you could like exchange labor. You could get cheaper prices on your insurance because you all need more or less the same type of insurance. You can do a lot of mass purchasing that would lower your cost. And this woman pointed out to me, she's like, and she was like me, and like, I understand the mind and the needs of the small contractor, smaller independent contractor. She understood the needs of small restaurants. And she pointed out to me that St. Pete is saturated with small individual local businesses. And I thought, oh, she's right. Like they actually knew how many, I think there were like 2,500 restaurants and so many food trucks, and they had their numbers down. It was huge. And it's true. We don't have the big franchises downtown. We have individual businesses. She's like, they're all working like crazy. They're all like working 80-hour weeks. And this would be an amazing support system for them. And I said, I know, but I did advocate to the city of St. Pete to fund cooperative business development, and they declined. And I thought this would have been the perfect project to work on, because we could have really helped them form a corporation that would take care of a lot of their purchasing needs and cut their costs down. So that's a shared service co-op. And then from there, we have so we covered the producer marketing, the work. Okay, the last one and second to last one is the worker co-op. And there are about 500 to 700 of those in the country. They're growing a lot, and we might even be up to 800. They were like at 500 for a long time, and suddenly they shot up. So that's where the workers own the business. So if you work there, people are kind of confused. They're like, so when I start working there, am I an owner right away? And I'm like, no, it's like you have an owner's cap and you have a worker cap. So when you go to work, you put your worker cap on, you do your job, you get paid a salary.
Right.
And if you're a good, there's always a co-op dating period. Like, you have to make sure you're a good match, because if you buy in, you're in business with that person. So you have to make sure that they want to buy in. And also, like, you don't have to buy in. You can just say, hey, I like answering phones. I do not want to own a business. I'm good just working here. So it is voluntary. They must be voluntary. So you could just go there and be a worker and not be an owner. And if you're an owner, then you attend board meetings and you help make the decisions and you help set the bylaws. And then there's a very specific accounting practice to distribute surplus. So the word for profits is surplus. So it's surplus income that goes to the workers that are also the owners. So you get your salary, that's one thing. But if you run a business, you make a profit, right?
Right.
So if it's just one person or two people, that profit is divided up in a certain way. So if it's the workers, the most typical formula is if you worked, let's say there's four of us, and one person works 10% of the hours, one person works 15% of the hours, and another person works 35% of the hours, and then what would you have left? So you're at 25 and 70. So let's just say
30.
it's divided up four ways. So let's say if you work 10% of the hours, then you get 10% of the profits.
Gotcha.
If you work 40% of those hours, then you would get 40% of the profits. So it's really, that's one of the formulas that's most common. So you would get your profits based on the number of hours worked that were earned by the owners. Let's say 20% of the profits were earned by non-owners. So a lot of times you don't consider that the owner's profit. That can go into a retained fund for retained earnings. That could go into expanding the business, buying new trucks, paying off loans. But usually the owners, the good ones, won't take that as their profit. They just consider the profits of what the owners earned, and they do call that surplus. They don't call it profit, but I know most people understand the word profit. And then the fifth type is a multi-stake, and that's typically where you have large numbers of people that need a voice. So let's say you have a grocery co-op and it's growing and you've got 100 employees and suddenly the employees want a voice. You could create a second class of stock. So another group within that business you could create like two classes of stock. You could have the consumer class and a worker class.
Okay.
So those are the five types of co-ops that are most recognized. And
That is really interesting. And it seems like if more businesses and more homeowner co-ops and all that, it would create more and more revenue within a community for these co-ops, and it would save all these people in the co-op some money when buying product for their business.
Yes, and also they're democratic because it's one member, one vote. So they're not only businesses, they're value-driven businesses. They go by the 7 Rochdale principles. All of this you can find on our website on Florida CEED, that's CEED .org. But we have the 7 principles listed there. So, but it really, it's one member, one vote. So if I bought in a traditional company, let's say a few of us get together and we start a company, and I put in and I own 40% of the stock. Well, guess what? At the board meeting, my vote carries 40% of the weight.
Right.
So it's almost always you can have an advantage that way. And in a co-op, no matter what I lend to the co-op, I only get one member, one vote. So when you buy a share of stock, it only entitles you to one vote.
That makes sense, and I think that's fair.
Yeah.
There's a lot more fairness there, and you can see a lot more equality among people doing it that way. And,
Correct.
and if we all went into co-ops, maybe we could get rid of the big corporations too, right?
Yeah. Well, they have their place, but you know what? I just think they keep more money circulating locally. They're more democratic, which we all love democracy. I mean, they're truly democratic, because even if our co-op needs a loan and you lend the co-op money, it doesn't entitle you to a stronger vote than your other owners. They're great on so many levels, but yeah.
So do you see St. Petersburg going more in that direction, or are we still far off from any of those co-ops even creating themselves. I mean, how many co-ops do we have in this area alone? Do you know?
We have a resident-owned community that's run extremely well. I paid them a visit. They have an amazing story. That's Americana Cove.
Okay.
They're a rock, an ROC are where a community creates a corporation, and you own a share of stock in that corporation, and they own the land. And then you individually own the mobile home park. You own the mobile home sitting on top of it. Up north, they have the same thing, but they have houses. So that way it always kind of keeps the land at a certain price. And then your management is you have a tighter control of management. So we have that. We have actually 19 producer marketing co-ops in the state of Florida, not anywhere in this area. Rural electric co-ops are pretty common. I think we have 17 of those.
I belong to one of those up in North Florida. Awesome. They're not here in our area.
Well, there's one they're based out of Hillsborough County, but they serve like the more rural areas.
Oh, okay.
But they're kind of located here. So I don't see, I gave 3 years of my best talent, really, really advocating for co-ops with the city. It kind of started with SEIU Union did door-to-door surveys. And I think when Tangerine Plaza closed down, because we have 7 census tract, low income, low access. They used to call them food deserts, but they're really indicated by low, medium, or household income, low access to transportation or low car ownership, and low access to healthy food, such as a big box store, because there's lots of mini marts. So when they closed, that created like a massive problem for healthy food access. So SEIU had just done some surveying. They went out and they did a mass survey, and they said they had 1,400 surveys of people asking for cooperative business development with an emphasis on a grocery co-op. Mm-hmm. I thought, wow. And this was exactly at the time I was getting my training. I've actually done several conferences with grocery co-ops, so I kind of mastered or understand the grocery co-op process. But I really tried, based on that argument, like that's 1% of the city. That was at the time with the last census.
Right.
I really wants that. And I really tried. I had a lot of meetings. I did 2 new business items with this to the city of St. Pete, why they should support it. The greenhouse was great to let us teach classes there. I really, really liked that. But it was a no-go. So I don't see that it's really supported there. I don't see that people understand it well enough to want to see it push forward here. And we're growing so fast right now. I think, I don't think St. Pete is really ready for it.
Yeah. So we're just going to keep growing here with no more land to build anything on. They're going upwards with buildings, and we're just packing them in like sardines right here in this area right now.
But one of the projects we're working on is after beating the drum so loud, with elected officials and foundations, and just really trying to get their attention on this food insecurity problem. Like I just didn't see everybody was having meetings and they're setting up committees and nobody actually was doing anything. So finally we decided to, I had really gotten interested in this program. I went to a grocery co-op conference, and it was called Vendor Relations. You sit in on these different classes all day.
Right.
And this really well-established co-op in Madison, I think it's Willie Street Co-op. That might be the one in Milwaukee, but there's like 2 big ones. They were talking about like, okay, we've been in business like 50 years and we've got 3 stores and areas of need and we're doing really well. What should we do with our surplus this year? How can we serve our owners? And so they decided that people were coming in with really great products, but they weren't shelf ready, like jams and sauces and things you'd sell in a grocery store, but they weren't shelf ready.
Right.
So they decided to come up with this program, Retail Ready. And what they did is they offered for free people to go through this program, and at the end they could start to sell in their store. And then someone says, well, what if they went and sold to Walmart? And they said, that's great. Let them go sell to Walmart. Like, we're here to help.
Mm-hmm.
Sell in our store, they can sell it to any store they want. And I think, wow, big box stores wouldn't train you for free to get in their store. And I thought,
No.
that is a brilliant program. That drove me for a long time. So I came back, and one of our board members said, and I was involved with helping lift I sat on the board of a struggling kind of co-op here, grocery co-op. But it was really struggling, and it wasn't getting much traction, but we were all trying. And I said, well, like, there's a very well-defined protocol to developing a grocery co-op, and you are explicitly told not to start any little market. Like, you have to adhere to this process.
Right.
And if you start a market, you're going to burn yourself out, and it's going to fall apart. So the people that help you develop grocery co-ops, they say you can't do that. So this board member says, why don't we just start do we have to wait for the co-op to open to start a retail ready program? Can't we have like a store without walls, like a farmer's market? And then we could help the vendors get trained now. And then once the co-op opens, they can be the future vendors of the co-op, because we invested in them and they could help give back.
Right.
And then they can also grow their own businesses and be in stores. And I'm like, yeah. Now the co-op can't do that, but Florida CEED could do that.
Right.
We're not the actual co-op. We're help developing that co-op. So we started to write a proposal. I think that came up in October of 2019. So we kind of like created a presentation and found some partners that wanted to work on a market, and we would try to locate ourselves within these 7 census tracts that have such low food access and develop a market. And then we went out and we advocated for all these partners. And then the lockdowns came. February, what was it, like February, March 16th. They came around mid-March 2020. So we were just getting traction. We had gotten almost everyone to sign on. And I said, well, the profits that we make, we could give the grocery co-op a permanent table to, spread the word, talk about what it is, and sell memberships. And we could take half of our profits and give it to the co-op, because you need to make, the protocol called, you should make 10 to 20,000 a year for operations to keep expanding the co-op.
Right.
And you don't touch your member equity. So the people who are buying shares, you shouldn't touch that money. So, and there's a reason for that, because you may need it in phase 2, and then you would vote if you want to use it for that. So I thought, oh, well, so we presented to all the members, and the co-op just declined. They didn't even want to hear it. So we said, that's okay. We want to do it. So we just I want retail ready. I love this thing. So we started this market. And in the middle of just when we were just about ready to sign a lease and get a location, everything just shut down. So at that time, I think by the end of 2020, it was getting a little relaxed, and I still couldn't get a response. Like, people were not ready to help anything move. So it was around February of 2020. One of the interested participants said, hey, I think I could get us a little spot. And we did the presentation, and they're like, okay, like $1 a month kind of deal to have this little space that we would get once a week for a couple of hours. And so we started there. One of the tenants didn't like us there because it was in front of a building.
Oh.
So the Deuce's Corner, which is sort of managed by the Deuce's Live.
Mm-hmm.
And they support. So if you become a friend, you can use that lot. So we became a friend and we used that lot, but they're going to be building a pavilion on there. So it was limited. So I think in September, October, we ended up getting another piece of land down the street, which was a vacant lot. And I think the construction documents were signed in October. And then we moved down the street, and then we couldn't get zoning to give us a permit. They gave us like a 1-month permit, and then they wouldn't renew it. So it was like, we're going to become an online market. And we posted about how we can get our permits renewed. And then someone offered us some land that wasn't vacant, because it's a different story. Like, they have different rules. So we ended up moving, but we've lost our momentum so many times, but we just keep plugging away at it. And we're starting a community garden next week. We're going to have a meet and greet, kind of potluck, and
Nice.
we're going to give a talk about the garden, community garden we're going to start. And so we got lots of projects. It's hard to get started up again, but we're just going to keep going.
So can they go to floridaceed.org to find out about that?
The better site would be Florida CEED is an overview of all the cooperative development services. They can book an appointment. We can talk to you for 15 minutes and answer your questions. That usually helps people a lot. And then www.southsidefreshmarket.com. You can learn about the market, sign up as a vendor. We have low tabling fees. We have lovely shaded trees. We're starting the community garden. We're offering retail ready, kind of, based on what you need. And yeah.
That is nice. So a lot of our listeners are from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
Can they reach out to you and ask you, questions how they could start a co-op in their area, or get some ideas from you or anything like that? Because I mean, I do have local listeners, and this is going to get the message out there, but I have worldwide listeners, so I think this is a great opportunity for people to learn about these things. Can they reach out to you and maybe have a consultation with you?
Absolutely. And if it's in the US, I have a directory of all the cooperative development centers. I think when we formed this one, we were number 40, but they're growing fast. Like more and more people are starting centers. So if you're in another state, I can direct you because business law tends to begin and end at your state line.
Mm-hmm.
So I know what we can do in Florida. That's why I called it Florida Cooperative Empowered Economic Development. It's
Right.
we don't. But if you just need some information, like somebody called me from New York, so I gave him an overview of what he needed, and then I directed to him to a local development center in his state.
Wow. So I am we've gone over a little bit of the time, but I want to thank you so much for coming on here tonight. One, you saved my butt because Mercury's in retrograde, and I had other issue with my other problem with another person coming on tonight. But two, I learned so much that I didn't realize. I never really sat down and had this talk with you. I knew about a grocery co-op.
Mm-hmm.
Or parts of it. I didn't really understand it, but I really like the idea of co-ops because one, it gives everybody affordable housing. It gives you good quality food, and it keeps everybody local in their economy going. And I think that's something to get excited about.
Mm-hmm. I think so.
It really is. So thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we end the show tonight?
No, I can't think of anything, but feel free to reach out to me. I'd love to help people. I really love to help people like figure this out and give them any direction we can.
All right. Well, Jude, thank you so much for coming on here and playing around with me tonight in my playpen here. And again, you guys can reach out to Judith. Her information is in the feed, and you'll be able to go to her websites. And if you're local, please, by all means, go next. Is it next Saturday?
Yes, next Saturday from 10 to 3. The address is on southsidefreshmarket.com. And so we don't have that many vendors. So we're really pushing just to get together and to get to know each other and how you can work with the garden if you want. And then we do the first Saturday of the month. We support the free plant swap in the St. Petersburg area because we have a great piece of land. We have 16,000 square feet with lots of beautiful trees. So we're doing plant swaps, and we're going to do the garden, and we really want to promote food independence.
Oh, that is awesome. So if you plan on going to that next Saturday, please bring a cinder block with you.
Yeah, I put bring a block or buy a block, and they're like $2. So we need cinder blocks for our raised beds. So Yeah, you can bring a block or buy a block.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, everyone, thanks so much for joining us for another edition of Raising Vibration Radio. You have a great rest of your evening. And until we're not going to have a show next Saturday, but the following Saturday, Tom Coates is going to be our guest on here. Have a great rest of your weekend. And thank you so much. And remember to stay on that high flying disc. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Thanks. Thanks so much for listening.
Let's see if I can get us in the broadcast.